Okay, James, in order to save time, I'm just going to keep you a list of questions, okay? My name is Ruth Franklin Rush. First name Isaac. I live in Union County now, but I lived in Mecklenburg County during the Depression. I'm 73 years old. I'll be 74 next week. I was born May the 22nd or the 26th, 1914. There were 9 children in my family, so that meant there were 11. Hoover was president, part of it, and then Roosevelt was president. I was too young to think of anything of the president. I didn't think anything of the president. I know my father thought that Franklin D. Roosevelt was about the best president we ever had. My father didn't have a lot of land, but we had farm. We lived on a farm, and we had about the same amount of land that everybody around us had. We had 100 acres. School during the Depression, we didn't know it was a depression. We had just consolidated into a new high school and had a library that we had never had before, and a science lab that we had never had before, and a home economics department that we had never had before, and a great big auditorium that we had never had before, and typing and shorthand classes that we hadn't had. We were not aware of the Depression. The young people were not, the ones that were in school. We'll come to that a little bit later when we talk about the community. We really didn't know it was a depression. Nobody had any money. Nobody had any money that went to that school. And it was a Cracker Jack high school. It was called the best one in the county, not counting the city ones, but in Mecklenburg County. A Hoover cart, my goodness, a Hoover cart was a homemade cart with 2 wheels on it and a mule pulled it. I don't think I ever saw a horse pulling a Hoover cart. And it like Miss Bean's 2 Hoover cart. It had a seat across the top of it and shafts. It didn't have a tongue, it had shafts. Because if it had a tongue, it would have taken 2 mules to pull. But just one pulled. And an old buggy seat was mounted on a lot of them, so you had something to lean back on. And I know 1 or 2 that had umbrellas that stuck in them, so people could ride in the shade. But it was a funny ride. You went like, this kid can't get on tape, can you? It went like this. I never rode in a Hoover car, but I saw them. They went up and down the road. Usually it was a Ford. They took the front axle out of a worn out Ford. Some of them had wagon wheels under them with metal bands instead of tires. But most of them had little tires on them. They were road close to the road. What differences were there in your community? None. We all belonged to the same church. The church had over 1,000 members. We all went to the same school. If it was anybody rich or anybody poor in that community, we didn't really know. We were poor, but we didn't know. How my daddy and the rest of the older ones got us through 31 years, I'll never know. Some of it was before the Depression, but most of it was during the Depression. There was one time We had 9 years of college to pay for in 3 years. There were 3 in college at the same time. And so we didn't know what it was to have money. We were too busy getting an education. And me and everybody in the community was like that. I can remember 1 or 2 families that we thought were poor, but we were Scotch Presbyterians and proud people of that whole community. And the whole community believed in education. And there was not a great deal of differences. I couldn't tell any difference in the attitudes and behavior, even the clothes that people wore before the Depression, during the Depression, and I guess I got married just as the Depression was beginning to get over. It was the first year I taught, my salary was $80 a month. The second year I taught, the state had raised the salary, and it was $90 a month, and 50 cents. What was it like to shop for groceries? We didn't shop for groceries. We had fish baskets in the Catawba River. We had chickens in the backyard. We raised calves, we killed a deer every year we can. At a different time from our back door neighbor, the father of the woman that Paul thinks is his grandma up there now. And we killed a calf 1 time during the year. And Cousin Sam killed them another time a year, and we gave him half our calf, and he gave us half his calf. And what we couldn't eat while we were saving, Mother came. And we had canned beef that tasted very much like the canned beef we buy now. We had pigs that we raised, so we had pork all year round. We usually didn't get into our hands until August, but we fed an amazing amount of people that came out from Charlotte. They were hungry. I'm jumping ahead because it's on one of your questions a little bit later. Business people and salaried people hurt during the Depression a lot more than farming people did because we raised our own food. We also, private farmers, a truck farmer. One year Papa bought cantaloupe seed and planted 2 acres of cantaloupe, and when it came out it was cucumbers. We had to pick them every morning. And he made more off that 2 acres of cucumbers than he would have made over with the 2 acres of cantaloupes. He had a contract with the only big cafeteria in town, to sell fresh vegetables, and with the Charlotte Hotel to sell fresh vegetables. So we sold all the corn we could spare, all the tomatoes we could raise, the cantaloupes, the green peppers, the cucumbers, mustard greens, you name it. My mother went to the county market home demonstration agent there, every Wednesday and every Saturday. And we spent all Tuesday getting vegetables ready, and then all Friday dressing chickens and making mother-made homemade bread. We had 2 stoves in our kitchen. We had a great big wood stove in one end and an electric stove in the other end. We had an icebox in one end and an electric refrigerator in the other end. We used all of them. And Mother made 22 loaves of bread every Friday. And we were so glad it wasn't that crackling time we could eat it. Because they were bringing 25 cents a loaf when you could buy a 1 pounder for a nickel. Mother sold it. And my daddy went by the bakeries twice a week to pick up great big boxes of turned back food that hadn't been sold, stale food, to feed his pigs. But the Freeman pigs went through it first, and if nothing was moldy, we took it in the house and toasted it and ate it. And there would be cakes with the date not run out on them yet. And we always went through the big boxes. If the package was broken, we wouldn't use it. If it was sealed up and it was molded, we'd eat it. Our back porch stayed full of fruit all summer long because we had an orchard in the front and an orchard in the back. The strawberries were mine and the figs were mine. I couldn't keep the money from the strawberries, but because the figs broke everybody else out and didn't break me out, I got the money for the figs. And figs were expensive. They were $1. And then they guessed $6. I'm getting off, but it started about the groceries. A big treat in the wintertime was the papa to call home cold night and say, I'm going to bring some salmon home tonight. Let's have salmon cakes. And that was we had that, what you gonna call it, really heavy heat all the time. And I want to jump back a little bit. I was talking about us feeding so many people. We knew that our people we scarcely knew when they would drive in our yard to visit at about 11 o'clock in the morning and hungry. And so we fed. And when they left, they would take home eggs, corn, and beans, and beans. We would fill the car up with all we could spare because we knew they were hungry. We didn't have any clothes. I had a cousin. No. No, they didn't pay the for it. But we knew they were hurt. We went to the dentist and paid the dentist with fresh vegetables. And one time he said he wanted some money. He was tired of getting paid in chips and wet spoons. So we got busy and got him up some money. I think we got him up $20 to pay it. My father was employed. He was a forester at the big town. His salary was $100 a month. And he finally got raised to $125 a month. It was the most he ever paid. And he looked after 40,000 acres of land for big power company up and down the Catawba River from Mount Myron down to the South Carolina line to Fort Mill. Lived in houses, collected the land, watched out for forest fires. He was busy all the time. I don't know everything he did. What is it now?
Because when they were farming, he used to do.
Yes.
And because the ration was a scarcity of actual cash, therefore we used food and barter.
Yes.
Like it was cash.
That's good. And we sold, you know that guy that Alan is working with the buses? Papa raised watermelon, and they never get ripe in August. And that guy's father hauled watermelons to town, and all you had to do was park on the street and sell your watermelons. And they would come up, and we would gather the watermelons when they got ripe, and pack them in a great bed of straw up by the well. And Cicero would come up and help load them in a bed of straw in a wagon. And then he'd come up about 5 o'clock the next morning and hitch on sitting on the seat with their matched mules to the wagon. And every time that he would leave the night before he did it twice a week, before he was going to take the watermelons to town. He'd say, I'll see you by daylight in the morning, Mr. Ike. Didn't want to leave him. And I was visiting next door one time, which has nothing to do with the depression, where the switchboard, the telephone switchboard was. And Cicero knocked on the window. And we looked out to see what was a window and he was holding a chicken. And he says, Miss Olma, says, me and your rooster collided. And he killed it, he run over the rooster in his Ford. He drove a Ford. Now he was both self-employed and because he ran a farm and did a lot of the actual farming. I never did. Some of the older ones did, but this was not really the depression. He was not unemployed. His employment was not due to the depression. It had nothing to do with the depression. The fact that he never got raised in salary did. And this is beyond the depression. But when time came for him to retire, the war was on. And so they asked him if he would keep that job on because it would the young men were skills. And so he didn't retire until he was 72. Did the depression hurt your family? Probably. There was a lot of worry about money, but it didn't pass on down to the younger ones. Roosevelt went in and began the methods he used to try to get us out of depression. We really hurt it then because they had a bank holiday in March 1933, I believe it was. I was in high school. Elizabeth was working for Duke Power. Elizabeth was working for ESSA in Columbia and got paid. And paid her room and board and had $11 left over. Lions Club. And she sent Papa the $11. And he kept $2. And he sent $5 out there who was working for Westinghouse in Pittsburgh, and their time had been cut until he needed it. And he sent $2 to Blanche and Roger and some 2-cent stamps that Mother had bought earlier than that. And I can't remember what he did with the other money, but nobody had any money. We were just absolutely without it for as long as the banks were closed. Our parents finally came home from, I said Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, because they got cut to 3 days a week. And he came home and had to live at home for a little while. But the house was always so full that we didn't really notice that it hurt being the cutest little girl you've ever seen, and it was a pleasure to have her. How did you handle it? I didn't handle it. My parents handled it. We knew the financial affairs of all the time. We had borrowed money against the farm from Federal Loan. And that thing always had to be saved for and worried about. and it was on our minds all the time. But we had never had any use money. I started off by saying all that money went to education. And we didn't know what it was. I had a cousin, I started this a while ago. I had a cousin, a good bit older than I, but just a little bit larger than I. And twice a year, my aunt sent a box of clothes at our house, and they wouldn't fit anybody but me. And they had been fairly wealthy. So I had some pretty clothes, but not a lot of them. I remember one dress I had was a wool pants two-piece suit with skirt attached, carpeted, and it had appliques around the sleeves. And I wore it all week and cleaned it on Saturdays so it would be clean for me to wear Sunday. And I wore it to school all week. In the wintertime, but it didn't matter. We had water in the house. We had electricity that we got before the Depression. We had a telephone that was owned by people in the community. And if we got enough money to pay the people that operated the thing, it didn't matter. Papa was the director of the telephone company.
Was that the telephone that they still have?
It's still up there at Virginia's. It was on the wall until they took that wall down. You crank the hand, and the operator says, Central. And you said, 80 barrels, please. And when we got on the trunk line, we had a trunk line to Charlotte. And we were a Dixie system. And when we got on the Charlotte telephone system, they gave us the switchboard number. And for years, we would get telephone calls from anybody in the community that didn't know that we were in Charlotte. It was 212. And the party lines, of course, and Bob, the store, and us were on the same line. But all you could do was ring their ring. You didn't have to go through something. You could crank it, blink, blink, blink. That was ours. Blink, blink was Uncle Bob's. And the store was blink, blink, blink. I'm getting off your questions.
That's okay.
I've answered the next one. Who suffered worse, the people in agriculture, the people in business? The people in business. Because nobody had any money to buy anything. And I would add to that the salary hurt worse than people that worked for somebody else, not people that own the business, because they lost their jobs. We weren't going to pay for it. There was an awful lot of people out of work. What kind of luxuries did your family have? There were 9 of us, and we had 9 musical instruments. We had a radio that you have now, a great big one that we bought second-hand and paid $15 for, and gave to Mother for her birthday. We all had a car. We had a kind of car that we had in the train. We had a roadster with a rumble seat on it. My day.
It was a Studebaker.
No, we had a Studebaker
No,
first.
Studebaker was not had back.
Yeah, we had a 1970 Studebaker. That was our first car, but that was before the Depression. And then we got 2 1922 Fords to take the place of that. And then we bought a Chevrolet coupe from Dr. William Harrison Williams that Papa used in his business. And then Papa got a red Chevrolet coupe with a rumble seat and a canvas top. A sport car that we rode all over everywhere. Then we had a couple of Dodges. We had a 1929 Chevrolet. We didn't get the Dodge till I started teaching.
Well, I keep interrupting and I don't hear a lot of it. And I know you're talking about the goals going a lot of ways and stuff. During the Depression, a lot of people took tires off of blacksmith, metal tires, beer, using contract.
Yeah, but I never did see that. Now, Walter built out a trailer and used, I don't know what it used for wheels, but that was during the Depression. It was something I thought was real interesting. And when you started talking about like out my
car. You didn't get the Dodge till you started teaching.
yeah, I want to tell about my wedding. We had the Dodge thing. We got the second Dodge after I started teaching. That was the guy who got after I started teaching. I did it right after a while. I got married in 1938. The Depression was beginning to be over. And Black James, we had to separate him from James, Elizabeth's husband, because of the two names James. He was invited to our wedding. And we still had that red coupe, that sport coupe. One was in there, and he went on early. And the bride always waits to the last to do it. And Mother and Papa and I went out to get into the Dodge, no key. And while we were out there, we were in my wedding finery, mid-drizzling rain, wondering what in the world to do. I'd get 10 minutes to 8, and the wedding was at 8. Looked up, and here came James and Marie out past the well, the black couple that lived down in Capeside. And we waved them down, and I got in the 1929 Chevrolet to go to my wedding. And just as we rode out the Walter whirled in, he had felt in his pocket and found the key. And so I got out of the car and I was late to my wedding. But that has nothing to do with this. I don't know how we handled it. We did like the COVID night at the King did. He does the best he can do. From early morning to late night, he works with all those men at night, he clothes, and that's his skin deal. But we had clothes. We had plenty of clothes. We were not unhappy. We did not know what it was to be unhappy. In our house, there was always laughter. There was always jokes, but no practical jokes. In some time, a rook game was started on the side porch the day school was out, and rook cards were taken off the side porch the day that school started, and the rook game never stopped. There was always somebody free to pick up a hand, playing rook, starting on about 10 o'clock in the morning and playing on. And I had a good time growing up. There was the word love was never much spoken in that family. It was there. It was so tangible you could almost touch it. We considered each other. There were not very many quarrels. There were a lot of little spats. Jeanette told Papa at the dinner table because he was registrar, and Mother was at the market, and Jeanette and I were supposed to clean up the house, and I wouldn't help Jeanette, and I would just put it off. I had a book to read, and I did it a little bit. And Jeanette called me a jackass and hurt my feelings. And that night at supper time, I told Jeanette, says, Papa, Ruth wouldn't help me today. I said, no, when she called me a jackass. He says, you're not a jackass. He says, you're a genie.
I didn't get
Jenny is a female giant.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't know. Did any of your chores originate due to the Depression? No. I had chores from the time I was born. And my chore during the Depression was every Saturday I cleaned up that whole house because I was the one at home supposed to do it. Saturday was the day I changed the beds because I had more time. I was not in school. In that great big old house, we had 6 bedrooms, 4 upstairs and 2 downstairs. And I started in the flower room and worked my way downstairs, changing the bed, dusting and sweeping. And it took me about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My job every morning was sweep floors, summer or winter. Churning was my job. Helping with vegetables was my job. Cooking was not my job. And you can't cook till you eat. I wash it. What to do. And on Sunday, I always fix the salad and the cheese. All the cheese. Hey, Jules, I just mentioned some of the new English to some of my wife's to pick. How hard was it to buy a washer? It did not cross our minds to buy a washer. We had a wash. Can you get me money and wash the clothes? Except for 1 year that Jeanette was going to get married and decided she needed a wash. And she and I really struggled with that her fuss and mom would start on Sunday to suit some. And we think there's always better to do. How hard was it to buy shoes? There were plenty of shoes, but there wasn't much money to pay for. And about 200 men just like they were money. One time Papa said, one time you were talking about his feet hurting. He took me to town and bought my shoes and paid $16 for a pair of shoes, which would give me $80. And the next day, I had promised money I would walk to school and came down with my old shoes on. And Mother was the boss. We always did what Mother said to do. Right then. She said, go put on your new shoes. If I took the whole afternoon off to go buy your shoes, we were going to wear them to school. So I went upstairs and put them on. I know the job was really far upstairs and bring it. And rode to school. I was at college by then. And walked like 8 miles home. And when we went to turn in at the airport, there were gypsies camped there, and we were scared to turn in. So we had to go on by the school, the high school. Added to, yeah. No, the airport wasn't there, but it was when you turned in to go to Plato High School there. So we went 2 extra miles, and I had blisters on my feet, and I got 2 toenails that I had to this day. The money for shoes was hard to come by. And we saved shoes the best we could. But, my father had last, and he had some shoes. And he put wheels on them. The Depression didn't come fast. He did that ever since I can remember. He was the one that polished the shoes every Saturday night, riding up on the hearth, dusting the fresh polished shoes Sunday morning. And this has nothing to do with the Depression. It was long before the Depression. One Sunday morning, Mother couldn't find Elizabeth's shoe. And we never had the second day. She wasn't up in his church on account of it, so she put a bandage on Elizabeth's foot. Nothing but a good bandage. And they went to church and know the word because she got to tell us good to me. That was long before the Depression. What did you have to do to buy gas? I don't remember. I think gas was 29 cents a gallon. The Michael was not running the store then. He closed the store and went and walked to the cow. The soda store. And, no. No, that was during the war when it rationed. If you could get money, you could buy gas. And we always were going somewhere. We went to the mountains every summer. We had somebody living up there. That's where some of that money went. This was $11 came $2 a month. Clothes. My sister project was about Mary Martin Snoop's secretary at Crossroads School. And they made their money from the old clothes sale. And Macy's and Gimbel's in New York is selling great loads of clothes every change of season, even during the Depression. And Blanche bought my clothes at the old clothes sale in Crossroads. They were new clothes that had come there from those particular stores in New York. She also bought all the costumes for all the clothes. Let's talk about entertainment during the Depression. Our church was a very forward church. Before the Depression, they had built what they called a community building. A stage, two dressing rooms, a kitchen, 2 big fireplaces, basketball goals, and a floor fixed for skates. These are different kinds of skates, and the church furnished the skates. We didn't have those skates. Not big. Roller skates, yeah. Roller skates. The one to the young people on Thursday nights. We had something scheduled every Thursday night in the summer. We had basketball games there Tuesdays and Friday nights in the winter. It was that kind of community. We had a band. We had a band in our own family. It's the community of the band. We had a band concert, and on the front porch, there was a stage. The young people in the church gave plays, operas, programs, every summer for all the big program and everybody knew people were just happy. In the wintertime, we had wind roasts in the fireplaces. We even had our high school proms. Banquets. We didn't have proms, we had banquets then.
They lost the classes.
We had the year that I was president of the young people in our church, we had 120 members. And we done about that many every Sunday night. Our courtroom was down. And we didn't go to the community, so we could go to it. But we didn't go to a lot. But on Sunday nights, somebody would ask us to go to church with them. And we'd come and get us. And the most serious boyfriend I ever had didn't have a car. So somebody had to bring him to my house. And I never knew on Sunday nights when I was going to come home from church with him tonight. We had parties. A bunch of us, and we had, in the wintertime, we did things like picnics, candy programs, things that didn't take much money. And in the summertime, we would have just Sundays. Because there was something going on in that community all the time. So the depression that I lived through was not the same kind of depression that thousands and hundreds of thousands of other people lived. It was not. But we've always come. And I didn't remember any actor when I thought that audition because the person wouldn't get fired. I instantly for 2 years. All the time I thought it was work and that sort of thing.
Just talking about walking.
He was 4 years younger than I was.
She was talking about driving instructor. They didn't have to have a driver's license.
I didn't know the drive till I was 18 because Mom would like to drive, and he started driving around the farm as well. He was driving on the road when he was 14. And Mother and Papa would make me go with him when he was 15 and 16, and he had a date. They would make me go along with him. And we would go to the movies, and I'd sit way in front of him, so I would go with him, even though he and Laura Francis were up to. And he would get me on first, and she could live in that state. I have left out 10 million things.
That's okay. You really.
Yes, that was very definite depression. Okay, turn it off. October Sunday afternoon. 3 steps behind. Always 3 steps behind. Listen. Exactly the right place to be. Listening to words quiet and comforting, gentle and comforting, persuasive, evaluative, occasionally humorous, hearing tones more than words, deliberate, unhurried, assuring, words that encircle me like warm arms, words with a sense of past, of a land that had been always here and had been always ours. Words with a sense of present, for the import was for today. Words with a sense of future, for they were words of planning for this year, for next year, for the next, and the next. I heard the words and I didn't hear the words, as we brushed down dead weeds with our steps, sidetracked to the juniper tree, or kicked aside an overripe persimmon or two along the dirt road halfway Camp Nervous. I saw without seeing the barn on the left, the holly tree and big oak ahead, the leafless cotton stalks with empty burrs and stray cotton tags to our right, and the veil of rusty, lacy weed tops at the crest of the rise that had somehow grown up in the strawberry patch. I heard the words and I didn't hear the words. I absorbed the tone of voices and the feeling of planning share that went beyond which field went to watermelons next year, which field of wheat, or corn, or cotton, which corner would be the missionary cotton patch, what to do with the red good, where to mend the pasture fence. I heard without hearing talk at the farm, plans that included management of school, activities of church and community, talk of personal ambition and relationship, and talk of love with the word love never mentioned. 3 steps behind, listening and not listening, feeling the Christmas October Sunday afternoon, chewing at the twig I had twisted to the black gum toothbrush tree at the end of the gutter, wondering if the berries had turned red on the ground vine in the front orchard, looking for a leftover watermelon protected in the frostbitten grass below the lower orchard. Green, sharp, carroty, sweet, tiny purple fox grapes that grew beside the branch, looking to see if the holly tree had any berries, wondering where I had picked up the bigger lice and Spanish needles that clung to the hem of my skirt into my left sock, and wondering why they were not on my right sock. 3 steps behind, in the footsteps of Papa and Archie on October Sunday afternoon, knowing and not knowing that I was in the most satisfying place on earth, knowing and not knowing that my life was being built, learning without realizing to respect truth and affection, strength of character, companionship, concern, and reverence in me.